Delight Your Marriage, Episode 5.
Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hi, this is Belah, and I'm so glad that you're joining me again today. I hope you're doing well, and I am doing actually really well. We had our rest day yesterday, and for those of you that don't know, our church actually really encouraged us to do this, and it's really taking a day off a week and spending it with your family or your loved ones and just kind of having no agenda, just really focusing on rest and relaxing, spending time with God and contemplating, just getting a chance to kind of pause life and enjoy. So it's been a really wonderful thing we've been doing, I guess, for maybe a year and a half now. And it's just been an amazing part of our marriage and our lives together. So anyway, yesterday was that for us. And it was also our Valentine's Day celebration since my husband was working on Valentine's Day. But we had a great time. We got a sitter for our older boy and we went downtown and caught a movie. I don't know. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've watched a movie in a theater. So we took the baby, but he was actually pretty good. He slept for most of it and he woke up during part of it and cried. So I put him on my chest and then he fell asleep. So it was great. But, anyway, so glad that you're here. I want to jump into the rest of the interview. This is the second half of the interview with Jay Dee with Sex Within Marriage. Now, the first part of the interview, that's episode 4, so you can find that at delightyourmarriage.com. And he really talks about the sexlessness in his marriage and the pornography addiction that really wreaked havoc on their relationship together for the first years of their married lives. So, secondly, this interview is really focused on more about how women can get past the insecurities that they feel with their husband in the bedroom, and also how men feel about sex, what it does to a man's emotions when he goes a certain amount of time without sex. And he even talks about basically the timeline that is. So it's really interesting stuff, and I want to just jump right into it. So without further ado, here's Jay.
I think there's this huge issue that women constantly think they're not good enough. And it's no wonder the way our media portrays, what a woman should be like. And I'm not saying women shouldn't be healthy and we shouldn't all work towards fitness and all this other stuff, but there's this underlying current in the media always to say you're not good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very unbiblical. The Bible always teaches us that, God loves us the way we are, and yet loves us too much to keep us that way. Mm. But the first thing is that he loves us unconditionally. I think our view towards our spouses should be the same. That, I love you the way you are, unconditionally. And I love you too much to let you stay the way you are. I'm going to continuously try to drive you forward to be a better you in the hopes that you'll do the same for me so that we can be a better us. Right? And that we can be better stewards of God's stuff too, because that should be our primary thing together as spouses, is to say, how can we serve God the best? And part of that is all this stuff about being healthy and everything. But this mindset seems to be upside down. So for the wives that have this struggle, my guidance to them is usually, read through the Bible. Look at all these passages where God tells you, he thinks you're beautiful. He thinks you're awesome. He thinks you're amazing. He loves you regardless. He died for you despite you being a sinner. Some of those verses where he talks about what he wants from a temple. He says all these things about, no, it needs to be like pure gold and polished silver and like all these expensive jewels and everything like that. And then he says, and I'm going to live in you because I don't want a big fancy building. Mm-hmm. And that is that's how he views us. That we are this huge, like this precious temple for him. And then I think that's probably the best way to combat this sense of what the world is telling us that we're not good enough. To say, no, God loves me the way I am. He created me the way I am. and he's going to live in me despite him having this option of having this massive temple that's all lined in gold and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically what I tell wives.
Yeah, I just love that. It's so true. And it's so true that it's something a lot of times as a wife, you really have to believe in order to just be confident enough to initiate or to satisfy your husband's needs. I mean, it's often you just have to go and do it afraid and just start even when you're not feeling like a supermodel. It's just trusting that he does really appreciate you. And the other thing I think for the husbands that are listening, so frequently men miss the opportunity to encourage their wives on their beauty.
Yes.
Yeah. And my husband is very verbally complimentary, and I'm very I'm very blessed that way. But it has taken years for me to really trust that he appreciates my physicality. It has taken years, and with pregnancies and with gains of weight and all the things that happen in women's bodies, it's necessary for you husbands to really be giving your wives that love and compliments, and just, even if it feels awkward, even if it sounds awkward, it's okay. She's still going to enjoy it. She's still going to appreciate that you say, wow, you look really good today. Or, gosh, I love this about you. Those things are just golden to wives' ears. So
they're only awkward at first, right? Once you start doing it, it becomes a lot easier. Whether it's, giving compliments to your spouse or whether it's walking naked in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my wife was terrified to be naked in front of me. Like, she would change in the bathroom, and she'd be under the covers if we were having sex in the dark. Never during the day because then there's light. And this was when she was like at her most fit, probably. But she was still doing that. She did a 60-mile walk once. For breast cancer, and so when she was training for that, she was probably the most fit she's ever been in our marriage, and now she was still like terrified for me to see her naked.
Wow.
But now she's 8 and almost a half months pregnant, definitely not in the fit, the most fit in her life, but she has no concerns about being naked in front of me. Awesome. Thank goodness. and she still catches me like staring at her, and she's like, "What?" I'm like, "You're naked." What? Do I need a reason?
Yep.
But it wasn't like one night she just went, and I'm going to be comfortable being naked. No, it took a long time, and she just kind of decided one time, I'm not going to hide. Like, and it was hard I know it was hard for her, but. I think she's much more comfortable now.
And I think that wives don't even realize how much their husbands want that, how much they want her to feel comfortable in her own skin.
Yes.
They don't want you to stand there naked, sucking in your gut. That's not enjoyable for him either.
No, because then we feel like we're making you uncomfortable. And then it's not that you feel uncomfortable, it's that we have done something wrong to make you uncomfortable. And so I think we feel almost some guilt on that too, to say, no, there's something about me that she's not comfortable with. So the women are thinking, oh, it's all about my body, and the men are all thinking, she's not comfortable with me. And we have this horrible spiral that just goes back and forth.
Yes. And I sometimes say that wives don't realize that their insecurity is actually hurting their husband, that they're insecure in themselves. And so they're not showing their bodies. They're not willing to have sex with the light on, or to do oral, or to go through just to have some variation in their marriage. But you're basically withholding this wonderful gift from your husband. And that's what, God gave you a beautiful body. He made it and designed it in many ways so that your husband could enjoy your beautiful curves and all these things. I just find it's very important for women to really recognize that they are so captivating to their husbands and to act like it. Because really, a secure woman is a lot more sexy than an insecure woman as well.
Oh, definitely.
So.
And the worst thing is, like, okay, if your wife is insecure and she's like, she happens to be naked in front of you, but you know she doesn't feel comfortable, and then you turn over because you're like, I know she doesn't want me to see her, and then she's like, he's turning over because he doesn't want to see me. And we start this whole spiral all over again. So you can't even do the right thing if somebody's insecure. There is no right thing.
That's awesome. That's great insight. There is no right thing if someone's insecure. So just break through it. Just break through it, wives. Just don't say yes to the insecurity. Don't say yes to comparing yourself to supermodels or to looking at your neighbor and saying, oh, I wish I had that body. Or no, say no. That's not okay.
Yep.
I love that. Okay, so you were in this place of complete sexlessness. You started working on finances. You worked on communication after that, and then you worked on sex. So did it all turn into roses after that? What was that process like?
It's a process. It's not a like overnight and everything's fantastic. And
one night did it.
Yeah, and we still. I mean, it's not like our sex lives are perfect anymore. I think some people kind of get this idea. Oh, well, you're a sex blogger or a marriage blogger. Your sex life or marriage must be, pristine. And we're like, no. Half of the posts I write are because of struggles that we're either gone through or we're still going through. Right. Especially my early ones. My early ones were still when we were still trying to figure out what is this dynamic. What is the dynamic in our marriage? Because we used to have a very egalitarian marriage, and we realized for us it didn't work. Nobody did anything. If there's no one leading, then no one's leading. Like, and so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean, and how do we implement this, and what does the Bible say, and what does that mean in our context and in our marriage and stuff like that. So like a lot of my, especially early posts, because my later ones tend to be more questions from other people. They're very much about the struggles in our marriage and how we were dealing with stuff, and how did we navigate some of these issues. So you could see during some of my posts, some of them I'm like, yeah, we're having sex every night, because we were at a time where we were like, okay, what happens if you do have sex every night? Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? So we went a few months where we had sex 80 to 90% of the nights.
Was it a good thing or a bad thing?
It was probably one of the happiest times in my marriage sexually. That was fantastic. And I think our goal is to kind of switch back, maybe not quite that high, but closer to that again. But, being pregnant and then breastfeeding and then running around after kids all day, it makes it almost impossible. So then later on, I'm posting about where we just had a baby and we're in our 6 weeks hiatus or whatever, and we're not having any sex at all. So I'm sure some of my readers are just like confused. They're like, we have no idea how much sex this guy has, because sometimes it's all the time and other times he's not having sex at all. And I try to explain it. Like, I'm sure the ones that like read every post, they get it because they see the transitions. But someone who's jumping through it, I'm sure they're confused out of their minds. And so, but what I want to say is that our marriage, it's dynamic. It shifts. It fluxes. There are seasons where you're like, well, sometimes it's better and sometimes it's not worse, but different, right? And I can say I'm very, even though we're not having sex every night, I'm very satisfied because our intimacy and all other aspects of our marriage is so much better now. That because it, especially earlier on, sex was such like this huge, big intimacy thing because we had no intimacy in any other aspect of our lives. And so we relied on sex in order to create intimacy. And now later on, we've realized we can get intimacy from other things, from talking about intellectual things or sharing emotional things or even spiritual things. Physical intimacy is only one aspect of intimacy. And when you have no other intimacy in your marriage, then it's a really big aspect. But when you start having all these other ones, you're like, you know what? I can take 6 weeks off. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Awesome. And would you tell us a little bit about kind of a wonderful time in your marriage?
I think this is probably my most wonderful time. And I love our blog. which sounds a little weird to say about my own blog.
I like it too. It's wonderful.
Thank you. But it's less. I like writing because writing is part of my process. I'm a split introvert extrovert, so I have to think about things, and then it still has to get out for me to like complete the circle of thinking. I can't internalize everything, or else it doesn't go anywhere. So my blog is a way for me to put stuff out and then get feedback back on it, kind of thing. And some of the times people just hate what I wrote, but I'm like, I don't care if you hate it. We're having a discussion about it. I'm happy. And in the last year, my wife has started kind of commenting on my blog as well, like within the blog, within the posts, and that has been amazing for me. So I get to read like these paragraphs of text about my wife that I might not be able to pull out of her, but because she's trying to help other people, different things come to mind. And so there's that, and then we just started up a marriage coaching practice, which was going to be just me, but I've had a couple people ask, oh, well, can your wife be involved too, so that my wife doesn't feel like it's two guys talking and her, so she doesn't feel like, overloaded by the males. And so she's participated in a couple of calls too, and that's just awesome. So this time in my marriage, it's amazing. And I get a chance to homeschool my kids lately, and my wife is constantly telling people how wonderful I am with the kids and everything, which is a lot easier when you're home all day with them, rather than, you come home from work and you're exhausted and you have to deal with the kids. But yeah, I'd say this time is, and I'm expecting next year to be even better. So
I love it. I love that that's your answer right now and in the future.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, what do you think the chief 3 things would be that have been central to your marital success?
I think first, right off the bat, is never give up. The one thing my church culture instilled in me about marriage was you don't get divorced. And I know there are some reasons where it's valid and everything, but I think far too often people get divorced way too easily. And if I had done that, I would have missed out on so much. Like the years of struggle that we have are eclipsed by the last few years that we've had together. And so there's many people who I've seen, oh, if my wife did that, then I would be out. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're missing out. Like, to be able to go through that struggle together and then come out is just, it's amazing. So that, I think that's the first one. Yeah. And then a second one is probably communicate. Communicate about everything. Marriage is about intimacy and vulnerability and transparency. And that requires sharing that and talking about it and not being scared to talk about it. And sometimes that means you have to talk about things that aren't fun. And sometimes it means you get to talk about stuff that's really fun. But it's really uncomfortable first, when the first time you have to talk to somebody about something that's uncomfortable, or the first time you talk to your spouse about your sex life, it's really awkward and weird. But it gets easier. Like when we first started talking about sex, we would use all these you'd trail off your sentences because you don't want to say the words, and you're just hoping they picked up the hint of what you're talking about. And now we're like, no, we can say just about anything. we more have to worry about, are the kids around? Do we want to have this conversation with them yet?
Yep. Very good.
So I think that's the other one. And then lastly, it's very similar, but learn to build intimacy in all aspects of your marriage, not just sex.
Go into that a little bit more. What do you mean?
So I love it. Usually Christina and I don't read the same books. She's much more of a read Facebook and see what everybody else in her community is doing, because she's very, very social. And I tend to be the more, no, give me a book and I'm happy. Everyone leave me alone for an hour while I finish this thing. And but there have been times, once in a while, we get to read the same book. We run a small group in our house for our church. So we get typically 4 or 5 couples, although sometimes we have some singles as well. And we'll either we'll either be going through questions based on the sermon from last week from church, or we'll pick a book to do as a group study. And the times that we get to do that, I love it, because it's a very intellectually kind of bonding experience for us. We're reading the same stuff. We can discuss our thoughts on it. Actually, the one time we did Intimacy Ignited, which was a group of 4 other Christian couples, which is a study of Song of Solomon, and that was just awesome. But even if it's not, even if we're just going through sermons, there's an intellectual conversation going on there, but it's also spiritual as well, because you're talking about theology. So you get to learn, what does my spouse think about these things, and what are their beliefs? Because a lot of times, people don't have conversations about what their beliefs are. They just assume that their spouse believes the same thing they do. And that may not be the case. And sometimes talking through them helps you get on the same page, or at least respect each other's beliefs. I've been very blessed to have a wife that, we tend to believe almost the exact same thing. But I think it's because, we've been dating since we were 16. So we grew up together. Our brains almost formed at the same time, in the same environment, and we struggled through the same stuff in our marriage and everything like that. So at one point we looked at our church and went, we don't believe what our church is teaching anymore. We both decided it, and we both jumped denominations together.
Oh, wow.
And we both agreed with the new one. And that'd be very hard to do if you're not having conversations about what you believe. That's another kind of intimacy. So yeah, your emotional and intellectual and your spiritual intimacy, as well as your physical intimacy, they're all very important.
So considering your expertise, Jay, would you be able to give the wives that are listening maybe a tip or something that you kind of wish all wives understood, or maybe a principal concern that they have about sexual intimacy?
I think the main thing is that sex is not just about physical sex. I think that's what a lot of wives kind of believe, that, oh, he just wants to have an orgasm kind of thing, or he just wants to see me naked. But there's this huge chemical reaction that goes on in men's brains when we have sex. It's definitely not just about the physical. Like I said, if you go a few days as a man without sex, all of a sudden your brain starts playing tricks on you. Your wife loves you, but all of a sudden you feel, and we're not really very good at expressing our feelings. We don't grow up with that vocabulary. We don't have the words always to even understand what we're feeling. But we all of a sudden start feeling kind of sadder. And I've learned that it's that we don't feel loved anymore. And so your brain has this juxtaposition that I know she loves me, and yet I'm not feeling it. And that's really difficult to deal with. And it gets worse as time goes on. So usually I find most men, they get to 2 weeks and they're like, I can hold this together. And then at the 2 week where they're just like, my wife hates me, life, it's the end of my world kind of thing, because there's this some kind of chemical reaction going on in their brain that's just telling them that life is not good anymore. And I don't know how we managed to survive this before we get married. I don't remember having this cycle. Maybe something unlocks in your brain the first time you have sex. But or maybe it's this, God put something in us to say, well, you're bonded with somebody now and you should be feeling that. And so I think that's something that a lot of wives don't really understand. Right. That when he's saying, hey, I'm really horny, what he's really trying to say is, I really miss you and I need to feel loved.
Yeah. That's a great translation.
we don't have, we're terrible at saying that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even, I think a lot of men don't even realize within themselves that that's what they're feeling.
Right.
Because we're so solution kind of finder kind of people, right? They're like, I feel bad. I know sex will make me feel better. I need sex. So the men, even a lot of times, they're like, no, all I need is sex.
Wow.
And But that's not what they really need. What they really need is that intimacy and to feel connected again. And that's why, like, if you look at all the research on affairs and adultery, a lot of them say it wasn't about sex. It was about feeling needed and wanted and loved.
Yep. And I think that is such a key element to share with wives, because I think so frequently women struggle with thinking that it's dirty or wrong. But God has designed it so that your husband desires you in this way so that you can have this experience frequently, because if it were up to many wives, it wouldn't happen as frequently as it would with your husband. So that it happens frequently and you are bonded and you are intimate and you are growing in that connectedness, that unity, that oneness. And I just love that insight, Jay, because I think so many women don't recognize the holiness of the horniness. So if I can say that. But I think it's God given. It really is, in order to bind you together as one through everything that happens through life. You really need that bonding in order to continue in order to have this family unit that your kids need and the people around you need, your church needs, the school needs. So anyway,
and there's this cycle that happens that you have more sex. The husband gets sex, right? He feels this intimacy, and all of a sudden he looks at his wife and he's like, oh yeah, I really love her. Like, he feels it now, and now all of a sudden he acts better towards her. He's more likely to do stuff like clean the dishes or whatever, and then she turns around and like, wow, he's really showing he loves me because he's doing all this stuff and he's saying all these nice things and he's hugging me or whatever, and then they're more likely to have sex again, and it keeps going around and around the circle. That's a good cycle. But if it doesn't happen, the opposite cycle it happens. One seems to be like, this is God's cycle, and the other one's like, this is Satan's cycle. And Satan's cycle is more, we don't have sex, and then he feels unloved. And so he doesn't really want to do anything for her because, well, she doesn't love him anyways. At least that's what's in his head. And so then she's like, well, he's not doing anything for me. Why would I want to have sex with him? And it just keeps going around and around and around.
Yes,
and
exactly.
and the sad thing is, it's so simple just to reverse it. Just one of them has to wake up and go, the wife can go, well, we should go have sex for the marriage, even if neither of us really feel like it right now. Because sometimes you get to a point that neither one of you wants sex because you're so upset with each other. Mm-hmm. But it's the right thing to do for your marriage. Or the husband wakes up and goes, I'm being an idiot. If I just showed her I loved her, it would probably mean that she might show the same in return, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because I think love is a choice. It's not. We often think of it as this emotion, but it's not. In the Bible, it's very much, God chooses to love us, despite all the terrible things that we do. And I think for our spouses, it should be the same thing. Like one day, Christina and I, my wife, we were having a big fight one night, and then in the morning, I woke up and we were still kind of angry with each other. But I woke up really early to go to work, and I walked into the kitchen. It was a disaster. And I said, she would really like it if I cleaned up the kitchen. And we weren't really happy with each other right at the time. But I had decided this is what I was going to do to show her I still loved her. And so I cleaned up the kitchen. And then she came down in the morning, and I was already gone for like an hour. And she sent me this text saying, thank you. I love you too. Aww. And that's all it takes sometimes, is just, to decide to do something to show that you still love them. You have made the choice to love them, even if you're not feeling it at the moment.
Completely agree. That's fantastic. Well, I want to ask you, just to wrap up, but due to the specific marriage that you've had, what opportunities have you had to serve God?
I guess my blog is probably the biggest one.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm astounded by it. I think it was about 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago in January, I decided no one in the Christian community seems to know what to do with sex. Like, no one's asking questions. No one's answering them. I hadn't found all these other marriage blogs, a lot of them. And so I was like, maybe I'll do something to help people. So my first thought was, I'm just going to go find all the resources that are out there that are kind of hard to find still. And I'll do data curate, I'll manage this data so I can disseminate it and share with people to help them. And very early on, and then I wrote a post, I think, myself, and people love that way more than me sharing other people's stuff. And I was like, really? People read this? And this year we hit, last year we did 750,000 hits, and which is just insane. Mm-hmm. Because even if you like account for people who just show up and then immediately leave and everything like that, it's still tens of thousands of couples that we've reached.
Yeah.
And the blog is full of comments, and I constantly see people who have pinned stuff on Pinterest and tweeted things and Facebook shared them, and I'm just like, who are these people that feel comfortable sharing on Facebook and clicking that like button, which basically yells to all their friends and family, I like sex within marriage. And I'm like, God bless them.
Right.
But I think it's definitely something God has blessed. Because so many times we get emails from people who ask us questions, and I don't get to write posts about every single one of them. I don't have the time. Half the work I do is in emails back and forth with people that the blog never sees.
Wow.
But lots of times I'm sitting there writing an email will come in and they'll ask a question, and I'm like, I have no idea what to say about this. And so I'll just sit down and start typing, and it happens to be I say the right thing, and they respond back saying, thank you, that's exactly what I need to hear. I'm like, wow. Well, good, but that wasn't me. There's no way I thought up of that. Mm-hmm. But I think having our struggle in this and being able to learn to talk about it and communicate, and all the research I did to try to kind of fix it, it has led us to this.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, because it really has, your specific struggle has then created this amazing gift for so many marriages. What is a book that you could recommend to our audience?
Oh my. Yeah, I struggle with that one because so many people ask me that. Like, what is the book you would recommend for me? I'd be like, the Bible. Like, it's amazing how much information and stuff about marriage is in there. But I think most people don't really read it for that. They think, I think a lot of people look at the Bible and they're like, no, this is talking about my spiritual life, and I'm going to compartmentalize that over here, and my marriage is way over here. And, never the twain shall mix kind of thing. Because God forbid God talks about sex in the Bible, even though we have an entire book on it.
Right.
But it's not just Song of Solomon, which is an amazing book on dealing with intimacy and marriage and sexuality and everything like that. But even like Adam and Eve, right from the get-go, when God says, okay, now I created you, go have sex. Like his first commandment is, be fruitful and multiply, which is basically go and have fun. and I always make the joke that Adam and Eve were created on Friday. So for them in the Hebrew culture, Sabbath is Friday night to Saturday. So their honeymoon was literally on Sabbath. And yet we have this idea in Christianity that sex is like this not so godly thing. But God managed to make humans and then made their honeymoon like the day that he blessed. And then looked at it all and said, I did a good thing here. And in fact, the word he said is not only good, but it's perfect and functional. It is like the undertones of the word he uses. And I think that's just amazing. And that's like in the first chapter. And then throughout the rest of the Bible, you see all this great advice all over the place. I mean, most people pull apart, the Corinthians passage about don't deprive each other, and all the verses on adultery, and well, what do I do with my husband who's not a believer? And there's all those too, but there's all these other ones that aren't necessarily directly they don't say marriage in them or this is for your spouse, but you can read all these like proverbs that teach you how to communicate with people and when you should hold your tongue and when you should speak. And that that'll help in any relationship, but definitely in marriage as well, because that's the one where we're going to make the most screw-ups. So I always try to point people back to the Bible, but then after that, it depends on what specific issue they're dealing with. I've read so many good books. At this point, thanks to my blog, I have authors that send me books, and they're like, "Please read this and review it," which is awesome because I love books, and free books are even better.
That's awesome. Did you have one that you wanted to recommend otherwise, or?
For women, your audience is mostly women, correct?
Right, wives.
Right. The one I read recently is called "Pulling Back the Shades." But I guarantee you'll see it all around the marriage blogging realm around Valentine's Day, because it's kind of their response to the whole 50 Shades of Grey phenomena. And they explore, it's two women. One, I believe, is a doctor, and the other one is just a layperson. And one has read the trilogy, and one has not. And they explore, why has this book series captivated, the female mind? What is it that we're really looking for that Satan has kind of thrown this in our path to do us? Because Satan doesn't come up with things that we aren't really interested in. He tries to find things to trick our brains. Something that we're searching for that's good, and he'll throw something across our path that's kind of looks and smells like it, but it's not. And so they explore, okay, what is all the symbolism behind this? Why are we so interested in this fantasy? Why on these power struggles and this dominance dynamic and all this other stuff? And it was written by women for women, and I read it in a day at a men's retreat. Sitting around a campfire with all my guy friends from church looking at me and laughing. Because they're like, "Why are you reading this book for women?" And I'm like, "It's amazing. This is the key to your wife's brain."
Wow.
And they all thought I was crazy, but well, I think they're suckers for not reading books for women.
All right.
Why would you not want to learn how their brain works? It was amazing and insightful, and it's probably one of my favorite books that I've read in the last year.
My last question before we wrap up is, if you could go back to year one of marriage and sit yourself down, what would be one piece of advice that you would give you?
I think probably learn to communicate faster. I wish I had done that right off the bat. If we had sat down, maybe not during the honeymoon, although our honeymoon was a disaster. That's a whole other story. But in the first couple months of our marriage, I kind of wish we had sat down and then just unloaded. And this is all the crap I brought into our marriage. These are the bad concepts I got, and these are the bad teachings I got, and I'm struggling with porn. Oh, well, I never want to have sex because I think it's dirty. And all this stuff. I wish we had gotten it all out of the way and learned to deal with it. Because I don't think anybody gets into marriage without baggage. We all kind of inherit all of our parents' baggage, right? So we're never going to be able to escape that. But we can definitely learn to deal with it. And that's hard because sometimes we don't even realize what the baggage that we're carrying around is. But if you start talking about things and saying, well, this is my view on this, and this is what I think about it, then sometimes it comes out a lot faster than if you don't talk about it, or if you're not talking about anything. So yeah, I think that's it. Communicate more and quicker. Get over that initial embarrassment right off the bat.
Great. Well, Jay, this has been an amazing interview. Really fantastic stuff here. I'm very excited. Would you be able to share how our audience can connect with you, how they can find you online?
Sure.
And even a little bit about your coaching practice. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Sure. Well, the blog's at sexwithinmarriage.com. There's links on the blog to Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and everything else. The coaching I started up just this winter, I think around December. I called it Anonymous Marriage Coaching. So it's anonymousmarriagecoaching.com. And there's a link on the blog to go to it. But basically, I started getting more and more emails from people saying, we're struggling with this aspect of our marriage. We don't feel like we can go to our pastor or our friends, and it's not really that big of a deal. Like, we don't need a counselor. We're just looking for some like guidance kind of thing. And as the blog grows, I get more and more and more of these comments. And eventually I realized, I'm helping people by answering them, but they're one-off answers. And I know that just getting an answer to something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make a change in your life. Mm. The best way to make a change is to have someone kind of walk with you and hold you accountable and help you process that kind of thing. And so I started up Anonymous Marriage Coaching for those couples that are like, we don't need a doctor or a therapist, like someone, like we're not broken. We just need like a shift of perspective, or we need a tool, or we need to learn to communicate, or we just need someone to help us figure out, what are our goals, what steps can we, take to get to where we want to go. And that's what coaching is really about, is to kind of walk beside a couple for a short time to help them just clarify, okay, where are we? Where do we want to go to? And what are the steps that we're going to get there? So that's what my marriage coaching practice is all about.
That's great. Well, so our listeners know that they can go to delightyourmarriage.com, and all of this is going to be linked up in the show notes. So really, really great resources. And, Jay's got fantastic blog posts as well. So definitely connect with him there. So Jay, thank you so much. This has just been amazing. And I really appreciate your time and sharing all your wisdom with us.
Oh, I had a lot of fun. Anytime I can talk about sex and marriage, I am happy.
That's awesome. And so we'll be in touch soon then.
Oh my gosh, such a great interview. Jay, thank you so much. And as an update, Jay and Christina just had their 5th baby, a little boy, and he's super cute. You can see that on his website. And it sounds like mom and baby are doing well. So, thank you so much for joining today. This was awesome to have you. So our next episode is coming out on Tuesday morning. And so check us out there. If you haven't subscribed yet or reviewed us on iTunes, please do that. And we'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining. If you've been inspired by this show, would you help spread the word? If you take a moment to review and subscribe, others can find us more easily. Find out how at delightyourmarriage.com/iTunes. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.